You could see the war was coming home.
79 years ago today, in the early morning, the American fleet in Hawaii was attacked by the Japanese. By the end of the attack, an estimated 21 vessels were damaged or sunk, 170 planes destroyed, and more than 2,400 dead and 1,200 wounded. Despite the tragedy of that day, Americans rallied forward and quickly prepared for the long, hard war to come. The National Museum of the Pacific War commemorates those who had the courage and volunteered to protect America. Today, we will be hearing from Captain Samuel C. Howard on the importance of remembering Pearl Harbor and the honor bestowed on Doris Miller. J.C. Alston, a Pearl Harbor survivor, will then recount his experience on the U.S.S. California during the attack. Afterwards, we will be unveiling our new Pearl Harbor Memorial Wall with the help of the Pearl Harbor survivor family member. Our program will end with taps and a video of the Fredericksburg High School JROTC placing flags to represent those who were not able to come home on that fateful day.
It's a privilege to join you from the Pearl Harbor Memorial aboard Joint Base Little Creek Fort Story. December 7th, 1941 was a Sunday like most any other. Most of what worried the highest levels of Navy leadership had little bearing on the plans the sailors and officers living aboard ships moored at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii that morning might have had. The sailors, soldiers, and Marines and Coast Guardsmen stationed on the island, along with their families, could never have imagined that life as the United States knew it would be forever changed after that Sunday morning. President Roosevelt called it a day that would live in infamy. Countless papers, reports, and books have been written about who knew what or who should have known what. And many more have highlighted the gallantry and heroism on display across the waterfront and airfields. Much later in the war that was formally declared against Japan the following day, Admiral Chester Nimitz said of sailors, Marines, and soldiers who fought on the island of Iwo Jima that uncommon valor was a common virtue. The same could have been said for the valor demonstrated during and after that attack on the island of Oahu. Among the many whose actions that day had a much wider impact on the trajectory of the Navy and the country was a farm boy from McLennan County, Texas, named Doris Miller. In their book entitled Doris Miller, Pearl Harbor and the Birth of the Civil Rights Movement, authors Thomas Cutrer and T. Michael Parrish detail how a humble man from Central Texas distinguished himself, among others, on that morning of crisis. Messman Second Class Miller was one of few African-American sailors assigned to U.S.S. West Virginia, BB-48, which was moored along Battleship Row on that fateful morning. Segregationist Navy policy at the time limited the kinds of duties to which Negro sailors could be assigned, and those serving in ships did so as cooks, mess attendants, and officer stateroom stewards. They were specifically prohibited from training for or operating any of the ship's weapons. Miller knew that occupational opportunity for blacks in the Navy was not as broad as in the Army, but he joined anyway to escape, in his words, sitting around Waco, working as a busboy, going nowhere. Well, the Navy indeed took him somewhere, and by the morning of December 7th, 1941, he had seen duty aboard 3 different ships and had been ashore in Cuba, Peru, Chile, Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, and the Philippines. Miller's Sunday started at 6 a.m. with him collecting officers' laundry and with no specific plans ashore. When general quarters was sounded, he headed to his assigned battle station, only to find it destroyed by one of the many torpedo hits taken by U.S.S. West Virginia. He reported himself available for other duties and was soon helping 2 officers move their mortally wounded commanding officer to a safer place off the bridge. While waiting with his captain, another officer directed Miller to assist with loading a nearby 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun. In short order, the Negro messman went from loading to firing one of the guns himself, blazing away as if he had fired one all his life, according to one officer, until they had exhausted all of their available ammunition. Burning oil on the ship and in the water forced Miller and the 2 officers to leave the bridge area and their now deceased captain and move to another, where Miller assisted in pulling shipmates out of the water onto the deck, unquestionably saving the lives of a number of people who might otherwise have been lost, according to a witnessing officer. Within weeks of the attack, the news of the actions of an unnamed Negro sailor became known to the highest levels of the Navy. Word of his heroics circulated across the United States, and efforts to have him appropriately recognized rang even in the halls of Congress. The number of enemy planes downed by his gunnery has never been fully verified, but the bravery, selflessness, and valor demonstrated to be well above the call of duty of a messman is a matter of record and can never be questioned. 9 of the 15 medals of honor approved for actions on December 7th went to officers. And while taking nothing from the gallantry documented in those Medal of Honor citations, Miller's actions rivaled the most intrepid among them. Even President Roosevelt was fully apprised of Miller's deeds and spoke directly with the Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, questioning the Secretary's reluctance to authorize an appropriate medal. Finally, in May of 1942, Miller stood aboard U.S.S. Enterprise, CV-6, in front of a fellow Texan, Admiral Chester Nimitz, who presented him with the nation's third highest award for valor in combat for the time, the Navy Cross. Public recognition of Miller's dedication to duty beyond the call opened the eyes of a national military establishment that stubbornly held to Jim Crow-style segregation within the ranks for no reason other than social expediency. It set in motion a series of decisions that paved the way for broadened opportunity in the military and naval services and the country writ large. Perhaps far more importantly than the level of medal that Miller received, he became an important symbol to the rest of society that a person's skin color, place of birth, or gender should never be used as an indicator of one's dedicated to the ideals of our Constitution or of one's patriotism, nor should it have been a limiter of one's opportunity to serve our country, particularly when the cause of liberty was at stake. Our nation and the military began to change, though quite slowly, as the war continued. Opportunity to serve in Navy occupations in ships other than messmen didn't open until near the end of the war. The Marine Corps didn't enlist its first Black Marine until 1942. It took until March 1944 before the Navy commissioned its first Black officers. Full recognition of women in the military didn't come for decades after the war. Even so, there's a chance that no such progress would have been started at all were it not for Miller's distinguished actions. My father enlisted into what was then the Colored Army to serve in World War II in the Asian theater, advancing to retire as an Air Force officer 2 decades later. My 30 years as a commissioned officer and retirement as a Navy captain, one who commanded 3 ships and one of the Navy's premier tactical training establishments, was served on the shoulders of Messman Second Class Miller's actions and of those of every soldier, sailor, Marine, and Coast Guardsman who faced the enemy on December 7, 1941, including Mr. Alston. Doris Miller's faithful service continued well after the attack until he gave his last full measure of devotion to this nation on December 24, 1943, when his ship, U.S.S. Lipscomb Bay, was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. In June of 1973, the Navy commissioned the fast frigate U.S.S. Miller, FF 1091, to honor the legacy of Doris Miller. The ship's motto, courage and devotion, spoke to the character of her namesake. In January of this year, the Navy announced that the 4th aircraft carrier of the new Ford class, and it will be named U.S.S. Doris Miller, CVN-81. That floating instrument of power, peace, and stability will be the first aircraft carrier named for an African American and the first to honor an enlisted sailor. The 4th verse of Francis Scott Key's The Star-Spangled Banner, which was later adopted as our national anthem, opens with the phrase, "Oh, thus be it ever when free men shall stand between their loved homes and a war's desolation." The 2,335 personnel killed and 1,143 wounded that fateful morning, 79 years ago, were among those who stood between an enemy and our homeland. They were the face of the giant awakened into action that would vanquish an enemy and establish a new era of stability in the Pacific for decades to come, into today. December 7th, 1941, may be a day that lives in infamy, But it is also a day that should forever be honored by every American because of those who were first to fight for a cause dedicated to a better world, continued pursuit of a more perfect union, and the preservation of our American experiment. Again, it's a privilege to join you from this active base and to honor the memory of those memorialized right here. Our nation continues to operate in support and defense of everything that we hold dear. And I pray for God's blessing on those who today serve in uniform in support and defense of our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and also for an undying memory of the gallantry displayed on December 7th, 1941. And on behalf of a grateful nation, I ask for continued divine blessing upon our United States of America.
Really, it was like some foreign movie, I guess. You don't think it's real at first. Of course, you can see that rising sun on the side of the plane. You knew who they were. I was on the quarter deck. I just come out from the main deck, out on the quarter deck to, I was being relieved for breakfast. And just as I got out on the quarter deck, well, I could see that guy coming the plane. If that joker don't turn on some running lights, somebody will start shooting at him. He had to pull up, as I say, had to pull up to get over the stack. As he pulled up, I could see that little grin on his face. He was that close. And about that time he hit in front of us. Well, they was number one target. So if he hadn't been there, we'd sit duck. All the bombs going off, the torpedoes going off, the ships are sinking. We lost 104, we lost 6 officers, 98 personnel. There were so many ships damaged and sunk, and so much fire, we come that close to being under instead of over. It was quite a scene. Still couldn't hardly believe it happened. We wanted to fight back. And we want people to remember that those people give their lives to make sure they didn't get over here on to us, the U.S.
We are here today to dedicate the Pearl Harbor Wall at the National Museum of the Pacific War.
Detail. Attend. Port. Left. Face. Ready. Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Port. Right. Face. Present.
Thank you for joining us for the 79th Commemorative Pearl Harbor Program. And remember, time will not dim the glory of their deeds and the legacy they left behind.